first thing Selah Winters noticed when she stepped through the front door of the Hale house was not the dust, or the silence, or even the little girl hiding behind the staircase. It was the clock on the wall, stopped at 4:17, its hands frozen like the house itself had forgotten how to keep moving forward. She had taken the job because she needed the money, plain and simple. A single mother of one herself, working 3 part-time gigs just to keep the lights on, Selah couldn't afford to be picky about which doors she walked through. The listing had said babysitter needed, flexible hours, generous pay, and when she called, the man on the other end of the line sounded tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. His name was Garrison Hale, and he answered the door that first afternoon looking like a man who had forgotten what it felt like to be looked at with kindness. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet power of showing up for someone who has given up on being seen, hit that like button right now, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Matters so you never miss a story like this one. Garrison was a contractor, the kind of man who built other people's homes for a living while his own crumbled quietly around him. His daughter, Wren, was 7 years old, with her mother's same copper-colored hair and a habit of speaking only when she thought no one could hear her. Selah learned within the first hour that Ophelia, Garrison's wife, had died 18 months earlier. A car accident on a rainy Tuesday that had taken not just a wife and mother, but seemingly all the color out of that house. The photographs were still up on the walls, but half of them hung crooked, as if no one had the heart to straighten them. The kitchen calendar was still turned to the month Ophelia died. Her cardigan still hung on the hook by the back door, exactly where she'd left it. Selah told herself she was there to watch a child, feed her dinner, help with homework, make sure she brushed her teeth and got to bed on time while Garrison worked his long, exhausting hours trying to outrun his grief with overtime. But by the end of the first week, she understood that Wren didn't need supervision. She needed permission to feel safe again. The girl flinched at loud noises. She refused to sleep with her door closed. She asked Selah, in a voice so small it nearly broke her heart, whether mommies ever came back if you missed them enough. There were nights Selah sat on the edge of Wren's bed long after the little girl had cried herself to sleep, wondering how a father could love his daughter so fiercely and still seem so far away from her. She began to notice things, how Garrison ate standing up at the kitchen counter instead of sitting at the table where his family used to gather, how he flinched every time Wren mentioned her mother, how he'd walk right past that stop clock a dozen times a day without ever once trying to fix it. It wasn't that he didn't care. It was that grief had built walls inside him faster than he could build houses for other people, and he didn't know how to tear them down. One evening, about 3 weeks into the job, Selah found Wren sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor with a showbox of old photographs spread out around her like fallen leaves. She wasn't crying. She was simply staring at a picture of her mother laughing on a beach somewhere, sunlight caught in her copper hair, looking impossibly alive. "Daddy doesn't like it when I look at these," Wren whispered, not looking up. "He says it makes him sad. But I like remembering her smile." Selah sat down on the floor beside her, and instead of putting the photographs away like she suspected she was supposed to, she asked Wren to tell her about the picture. And for the first time since Selah had arrived in that house, she watched a 7-year-old girl talk about her mother with something other than fear in her eyes. She talked about her with joy. That was the night everything began to shift, though neither of them knew it yet. Garrison came home earlier than expected and found them there on the kitchen floor, photographs scattered everywhere, his daughter laughing, actually laughing, as Selah asked her to describe every ridiculous, wonderful detail about the woman in a floppy sun hat squinting at the camera. He stood frozen in the doorway, his keys still in his hand, and for a moment Selah thought she'd made a terrible mistake, that she'd crossed some invisible line he'd built around his pain. But then she saw his eyes fill, and he didn't say a word. He simply walked over, lowered himself to the floor with them, and picked up a photograph of his own. His hands were shaking. It was the first time in 18 months he had let himself look at his wife's face without immediately looking away. From that night forward, something in the house began, slowly, to breathe again. It didn't happen all at once. Grief doesn't work that way, and Selah never pretended it did. There were setbacks. There were nights Garrison came home hollow-eyed and silent, unable to speak, and nights Wren woke up screaming from nightmares she couldn't explain. But there were also mornings when Selah caught Garrison humming while he made coffee, a sound so unfamiliar in that kitchen that Wren actually ran in to see what it was. There was the Saturday afternoon when Garrison finally reached up and straightened every crooked photograph on the wall, one by one, his jaw tight but his hands steady. There was the day he finally took Ophelia's cardigan down from the hook, folded it carefully, and placed it in Wren's room instead, not hidden away, but on it, given a new place to live. Selah never set out to fix anyone. She would tell you, if you asked her, that she was never that brave or that wise. She simply refused to look away from the pain in that house the way everyone else seemed to have learned to do. She asked questions people were afraid to ask. She let a little girl talk about her mother instead of shushing her grief into silence. She left the kitchen calendar turned to the current month one day, quietly, without a word, and when Garrison noticed, He didn't tear it down in anger like she feared he might. He simply stood there for a long moment, and then he thanked her. Months passed. The clock on the wall, the one frozen at 4:17, finally got fixed on an ordinary Tuesday evening, when Garrison pulled a stepladder from the garage without anyone asking him to, and reset it to the correct time while Ren held the ladder steady and Selah made dinner in a kitchen that no longer felt like a museum of loss, but like a home slowly remembering how to be lived in. Ren started sleeping with her door open again, not because she wasn't afraid anymore, but because she finally trusted that someone would be there if she called out in the night. Garrison started sitting at the table again, and one evening, almost shyly, he asked Selah to stay for dinner instead of rushing home to her own daughter. And for the first time, two broken families sat around one table and, without quite realizing it, began to feel less broken. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible, even when it feels impossible. Your support means more than you know and helps stories like this reach the people who need them most. Before we close this chapter, I want to ask you something special. Type the word healing in the comments below if you believe that sometimes the smallest acts of showing up, of staying, of simply refusing to look away, can rebuild a home from the inside out. Selah never did become just the babysitter. She became the reason a stopped clock started ticking again, the reason a little girl learned it was safe to remember her mother's laugh, the reason a grieving father found his way back to his own kitchen table. She thought she'd been hired to watch a child for a few hours a day. What she actually did was walk into a house full of silence and, one patient afternoon at a time, help two broken hearts remember how to beat again. Together, at the same table, in the same home, finally, gently, healed.